What did Danhang say about the Warden Festival again? That is not going to be as crazy as the Charmony Festival? That is going to be a fun little festival honoring Landa Hunt and the Cloud Knights? Yeah, I love how wrong he is. What started as a cute little reunion with friends from the Xianzhou Luofu quickly got interrupted by an attack from a factions of the Abominations of Abundance, a questioning to clear Jingyuan of the traitor of the Hunt allegation, a prison break from the leader of that Abominations of Abundance faction, a revelation of what's inside Luocha's coffin, and last but not least, a teaser to the return of Tingyun. Quite a lot to take in, I must say. So for now, I will choose one topic that interests me the most, and that is Jingliu's Godslayer protocol and its connection to Ran Mei and the resurrection of Tingyun. The rest will be included in a separate video where I will explain the entirety of Pantilia's plan for the Luofu self-destruction. Now, let's refocus our attention a few patches back. In fact, let's go all the way back to last year when Luocha was first introduced in the story and asked this question: what's in the box? This is a question that has been asked to Luocha many times since his arrival on the Xianzhou, not only because it's weird to see somebody carrying a big box around, but also because the concept of coffins is alien to the people of Xianzhou. As a group of long-life species, the concept of burying the dead is not something that they're accustomed to. We have the Xianzhou native who would be admitted to the Hall of Karma once they start showing signs of Mara. The Foxians will place their dead on Starskiff and fly the Starskiff beyond the Jade Gate, while the Vidyadhara would go through a hatching rebirth when they got very old. So a traveling merchant who goes around carrying a big box surely would raise questions. To Sushang, he said that the individual inside the coffin was neither friend nor relative, but merely someone he had only met once before. To others, he said that the box was the tool of his trade. Somebody asked him to deliver the coffin to the Xianzhou, so that's how he ended up there. Interestingly, whoever or whatever is inside the coffin does not seem to be dead. Luocha talks to it from time to time, and although he gets no response most of the time, one instance that is recorded in his signature light cone shows that the thing or the person inside the coffin seems capable of controlling branches. Or maybe it is not the content of the coffin that he talks to, but rather the coffin itself. He does use the coffin in combat, and during his ultimate we can see branches spreading out from it. After Phantilia was defeated and the resurgence of the disciples of Sanctus Medicus was subdued, Luocha confessed that he was the one responsible for the Stellaron crisis. He surrendered and was detained by Jingyuan and the Cloud Knights along with Jingliu, who admitted to be his accomplice. A quick side note, Jingliu is the former sword champion of the Luofu. She was Jingyuan's master as well as part of the legendary group of heroes called the High Cloud Quintet. After an incident involving the members of the group, Jingliu succumbed to Mara. By law, she should have been sent to the Hall of Karma, but Jingliu easily stopped all attempts made by the Cloud Knights to detain her, leading to Jingyuan eventually having to fight her himself, fulfilling the promise he had made Jingliu way back when he was still her student. However, despite the massive final blow from Jingyuan, Jingliu managed to survive that and escape the Luofu. Many years had passed since then, and Jingliu came back after making a deal with someone that allowed her to retain her sanity and keep her Mara at bay. According to Luocha, this is the solution to severe Yaoshu's curse of immortality. Then, before he was transported to the Xianzhou Shuling for his trial, Luocha was questioned by Jingyuan at the Scale Gorge waterscape. Instead of the shackling prison, Jingyuan chose that place because he wanted to ask questions related to Jingliu without being overheard by anyone. After all, the last time he saw her, she was Mara-struck, but now she was back on the Luofu with her sanity intact. What changed? What did she want? Luocha took this opportunity to reassure Jingyuan that he was on the same side as the general. His power might come from Yaoshu, but he wanted to put that Aeon in their grave as much as the Alliance did. He also admitted that surrendering to the Cloud Knights was part of his plan all along because his real goal was to have an audience with the Marshal herself. This was something that Jingyuan suspected to be the case, so instead of the Shuling, he intervened by sending the two of them to the Yuche first. The Arbiter General of the Yuche, General Yao Guang, also known as the Seer Strategist, who spent most of her time divining for the Marshal, took interest in the case and wished to see the two of them before their trial. The results of Yao Guang's investigation was then shared with Jingyuan as well as Fei Xiao and Huaiyan, the Arbiter General of the Yaoqing and Zhuming respectively, who happened to be on the Luofu for the Warden's Festival. Their actual reason is more complex, so for simplicity's sake, let's leave it at that for now. General Yao Guang confirmed Jingyuan's suspicion that Jingliu and Luocha were lying about their involvement in the Stellaron crisis. They were not the one who planted the Stellaron, but claimed so anyway because they wanted to be brought in front of the Marshal, a chance for them to present her with their strategy to defeat Yaoshu the Abundance. They called it the Godslayer Protocol, and it revolved around the content of Luocha's coffin, which turned out to be, cue the drumroll please, a fragment of the propagation's divine body. Taezeronth, the Swarm author, the allegedly dead Eon whose emulator clone we fought at Herda space station. They claim that this fragment of Taezeronth would serve as the final nail to seal Yaosha's fate and secure its doom. Believing that it would be necessary for the Shanzhou to have a larger alliance before going all out to fight the gods, Jingliu and Luocha had secured an ally for them. Enter Genius Society member number 81, Runmei. Runmei's involvement in the Godslayer protocol is quite interesting to say the least. It implies that she has had Tingyun with her for quite some time now, even before Trailblazer was hired to be her lab assistant, and that she might be the one who provided Luocha with the propagation fragment. Hear me out. General Yao Guang said that Jingliu and Luocha had sought out an ally for the Shanzhou, right? And it was Runmei. The problem is, the two of them are now prisoners of the Alliance and have been detained ever since Vantilia was defeated. They have never left the Luofu since the Stellaron crisis started due to the lockdown enforced on the planet. I mean, remember how suspicious Yukong was of the Express crew for knowing about the crisis? They had made sure nothing and no one could get out of the Luofu since the Stellaron burst occurred. There was no way for the crew to know about it unless they were behind it or at least in cahoots with whoever was behind it. So, if neither Luocha nor Jingliu had left the Luofu since they arrived on the ship, when did they manage to strike a deal with Runmei? It could have only been before they came to the Luofu. Which brings us to a little discussion about the timeline of the Trailblaze missions. See, out of all the Continuance missions, Crown of the Mundane and Divine, a quest that features Runmei and Dr. Ratio, is the trickiest to put within the timeline. Jolted Awake from a Winter Dream, a quest that features Topaz and takes place in Belobog, happens after the main Luofu arc because 1. The requirement to play this quest is the completion of the Luofu arc, and 2. At the beginning of the quest, March mentioned that there was still some time before they had to attend a party at Penacony. Penacony being their next destination was something that Himiko had kept a secret from both March and Trailblazer. She only revealed it after the crew decided that they would go to the Luofu. A Falchion Tale of the Haunted also happens after the Luofu arc because of the quest completion requirement and the mention of Trailblazer helping to resolve the Amborcial Arbor crisis. Finest Duel under the Pristine Blue, the most recent Trailblaze Continuance missions, takes place after the crew is done with the Charmony Festival. Although the Penacony quest is not listed as the requirement and these two-part missions are categorized under the Shanzhou Luofu section, the opening dialogue among the crew confirms the timeline. A side note, I love how this little exercise shows just how unreliable the Fates Atlas feature is. It only groups and sorts the quests by planets, but not necessarily in a chronological order. And then we have the Crown of Mundane and Divine quest that lists Belobog quest as the requirement but no quest description nor dialogue that may hint where this quest stands within the timeline. Nobody talks about it afterwards, which makes sense because Runmei has made sure that Trailblazer will forget about her and what she has made them do at the space station. So now the only clue we have is the quest requirement, which will put this quest right after the crew left Belobog and just before they had the meeting that was interrupted by Kafka. It sounds weird, I know, but if you make a new account now and play through up until the Belobog arc, nothing and no one will stop you from going back to Herda space station and meet Runmei. A displacement also makes sense if we consider the gap between the Express leaving Yarilo 6 and Trailblazer knocking on Danheng's door to ask him to join the meeting. In the quest itself, the gap is filled with the out of 5 people, 3 must pay the price cutscene, and when the scene was back on the Express, Trailblazer and March were knocking on Danheng's door to wake him up for the meeting, implying that at least it was the next day. It is as if nothing has happened in between because Trailblazer is meant to forget about Runmei and the whole Emulator of Propagation shenanigans. Okay, it took us a while to get here, but now we've established that the Runmei quest happened before the Luofu arc, which could explain how Jingliu and Luocha managed to strike a deal with Runmei. They did so before they came to the Luofu. In that same quest, Trailblazer was tasked by Runmei to take care of the clone emanator of propagation that she had created. One of the materials she used to create the clone was data left behind by Taezeronth themselves. Considering that Runmei met Luocha and or Jingliu or both around the same time she started nurturing the emanator of propagation, it means that she was already in possession of the propagation data. This could explain where Luocha got the fragment of propagation from. Runmei gave it to him. This could also explain his comment about Tingyun during his short travel with Shushang and Danheng. At one point, Danheng asked him what his original plan was and Luocha said that he had an appointment with Tingyun. They had a business deal to discuss, but he feared that the appointment would no longer go ahead. Mind you, since the lockdown on the Luofu, he had only been traveling with Dan Heng and Su Shang and made no contact whatsoever with anyone. So how could he know that the appointment was no longer happening? And why did he say it in a way that implied something bad had befallen the other party when the fake Ting Yun was still alive at this point? Unless, of course, he knew something bad did happen to Ting Yun and he was hinting at it. Not to the illusory one that broke his neck in front of the crew, but the real Ting Yun, whom Runmei saved from the wreckage of the Whistling Flames ship. Maybe Lu Shan knew about this because Ting Yun was there with Runmei when he was forming the alliance with her. And if you're wondering how I can be so sure that the Ting Yun the crew met on the Luofu had always been an illusion conjured up by Phantilia, I have made a whole other video on the topic which I will leave a link to in the description box below. So, Runmei agreed to team up with Jinglu and Luocha. Highly likely met the two of them in person before, perhaps was also the one who provided Luocha with a fragment of propagation, and is now arriving on the Luofu, possibly with a resurrected Ting Yun. But I think there's one other thing that she had done for the duo, especially Jinglu. Remember what I said earlier about Jinglu making a deal with someone that allowed her to retain her sanity and keep the Mara at bay? Luocha said that this was the solution to end Yaoshe's curse and later revealed that the solution revolved around the content of his coffin, the fragment of propagation. This fragment was possibly given to him by Runmei. You know where I'm going with this, right? What if the person whom Jinglu made a deal with to keep her sanity is in fact Runmei? Listen, I was freaking out when I arrived at this conclusion in the middle of the writing of this video, so please bear with me as I go full on speculative mode for a bit. The exact plan on how the propagation fragment will be used to seal Yaoshe's fate is yet to be disclosed, but it could have something to do with the result of Runmei's experiment on the propagation emanator clone. See, Runmei was trying to make a clone of the emanator because she was trying to understand the essence of life. She had tried making a genius before, but it did not work, so she looked to other paths that could be more primitive and pure than erudition. That's how she landed on the propagation. She recreated the emanator to understand at what point they got closer to eons and further away from humans. Basically, she arrived on that decision not with a malicious intent, but rather a pure curiosity on understanding life. And that experiment was successful. The clone obliterated itself after 56 seconds just as she had calculated. Now, if we look at all the experiments Runmei recorded in the same lab log, they're all an attempt at creating life forms. All failed to meet the expected result except for the creation of the clone emanator. While the clone did not hold a candle to the emanator itself due to the constraint of time and place, Runmei managed to replicate the moment it was born. Meaning, Runmei has figured out how to nurture an emanator of propagation. Given more time and a more suitable place, she could nurture one that could sustain itself for longer. If not fully, she now has a better understanding of propagation. So what does all this have to do with Jinglu? Well, according to Bailu, there is a dark current running and pulsing between Jinglu's core S and her veins. This core S is believed to be the key that would kickstart the Mara in the Shanzhou native like a seed they could grow and spread in their circulatory system, growing like an inner ambrosial arbor, an extra organ that they obtain from the blessing of the abundance. The dark current that runs and pulses between Jinglu's core S and her veins could be the thing that is keeping her Mara at bay, blocking the core S from spreading, working just like the black cloth that covers her eyes from looking at painful memories. And if we go by color theory, I can think of one eon that is associated with the color black, and that is Daisiranth. So, what if this revelation that Jinglu stumbled upon involves some kind of experiment done on her by Runmei? After all, Runmei is an expert in life sciences. She has an understanding of propagation thanks to the emanator clone experiment, so studying another eon of life is the obvious next move. And that's when Amara-stricken Jinglu comes into the picture. Perhaps at one point, Runmei managed to restore Jinglu's mind long enough for them to have a conversation and eventually come to an agreement which involved Runmei fully restoring Jinglu's sanity, keeping her Mara at bay, and in return, Runmei would be invited to the Luofu where she could do more of her life-related research and experiments. I know this all sounds ridiculous and I'm sure you guys think I'm crazy for making this up, so now let me draw your attention to our beloved ambassador from the Skyfaring Commission, Ting Yun. I promise, these two are related. Towards the end of the meeting between the generals, General Yao Gong told the other generals that Runmei was arriving on the Luofu. Then the screen faded to black and we heard Runmei asking somebody whether they remembered their name. The other person said they did, and they turned out to be none other than Ting Yun, the ambassador who has been declared dead in the aftermath of the Ambrosial Arbor crisis. I've talked about this at length in this other video, and to summarize, the Tingyun that the crew met since their arrival on the Luofu has always been Phantylia. Phantylia conjured up the illusion to infiltrate the Luofu and then destroyed it once she had no more use of it. This is confirmed by Fu Xuan. Despite having been declared dead, Yukong is still trying to figure out what happened to the real Tingyun. One of her many attempts is to request some assistance from Fei Xiao, her comrade in arms from 30 years prior. Following the route that Yukong provided, Fei Xiao's army found the wreckage of Tingyun's ship. She said there were no survivors and that Ruan Mei got there first before her. This information implies that there might be survivors, but Ruan Mei had rescued them before Fei Xiao's fleet arrived. Also, judging by the state of the ship, it was highly likely Phantylia's doing. She couldn't possess the real Tingyun for the risk of Tingyun getting Mara-stricken, so the better alternative was to conjure up an illusion in the image of Tingyun. And then, to avoid any suspicion from people who knew Tingyun, she needed to study Tingyun's mannerism. And so she intercepted Tingyun's ship, held her hostage until she got her mannerism memorized, and then she destroyed the ship along with Tingyun in it and left for the Luofu. We still don't know how much time had passed between Tingyun's ship getting destroyed to Ruan Mei arriving on the scene, but I imagine Tingyun must have been severely injured, if not dead already. Yet somehow, she came back from it. Ruan Mei, the expert in life sciences, has not only rescued Tingyun, but also has brought her back to life. Perhaps not the most impressive feat from someone who has literally resurrected her parents, a Genius Society member, and made a clone of an Emanator, but hey, that's our beloved Amikaster that she resurrected there. So, if Ruan Mei can bring back Tingyun, who has crossed paths with an Emanator of destruction, who's to say that she cannot bring back Jingliu, who has been Mara-stricken? See? I told you these two were related. Now, we've established the connection between Jingliu, Luocha, Ruan Mei, and Tingyun, but what about the plan itself? Well, Ruan Mei nurtured an Emanator clone before, so she must be trying to resurrect Taserons, right? Wrong. As I've mentioned earlier, she nurtured the Emanator clone not out of a malicious intent. She wanted to answer questions related to this particular life form, not to bring about calamity to the world. It is clearly stated in her lab log that she expected this clone to live for exactly 56 seconds before it destroyed itself. Could something have gone wrong and the clone ended up living for longer than 56 seconds? It could have, but all of her previous experiments ended up living for a much shorter time than her calculation, so I doubt this one would have been different. Even if Ruan Mei planned to resurrect Taserons, do you think Jingliu would just agree to that? Her number one goal is to kill an Aeon. Why would she agree to resurrect another that is a much bigger threat just to achieve this goal? Then again, even if Jingliu agreed to that and they managed to resurrect Taserons, how exactly are they going to make Taserons go after Yaoshi? Even if Ruan Mei could calculate exactly for how long Taserons would be alive, how can they ensure the Aeon would spend that time hunting down Yaoshi instead of, I don't know, propagating? So yeah, I don't think this is what Godslayer Protocol is all about. I think it is more akin to what Jingliu has going on with her. After all, it is Jingliu's revelation. It's what allows her to come back from the Mara. Maybe what they're trying to do is in fact to seal Yaoshi. Just like Jingliu's core S that is blocked by the dark current, they will use Taseron's fragment as the final nail to Yaoshi's coffin. And Jingliu is there as a proof of concept for the plan. As to why they come to the Shanzhou with the plan instead of executing it themselves, I believe it has something to do with the newly resurrected Ambrosial Arbor. I mean, if the core S is a seed that can grow to be an inner Ambrosial Arbor inside every Shanzhou native, wouldn't it make sense for them to test out their plan on the actual Ambrosial Arbor? See if the theory is applicable and working? Plus, the fact that the Arbor is now resurrected is a plot point that is yet to be addressed. It used to be the thing that drew the Elixir Seeker to the Luofu and is the source of their curse. For them to just let it be there in all of its previous glory is kinda weird. As to how exactly they would go about it, how they would seal Yaoshi, we'll have to wait and see.